Genshin fans have been in a heated debate about whether or not the new region Natlan was a beautiful nation with vast culture and representation, or a racist dumpster fire of hot feces. It's finally time to break down the good, the bad, and the ugly of Teyvat's most controversial nation. Natlan brought us a new, fantastical, and colorful region with vast cultural diversity and colorful character designs. Each playable character was heavily themed around the tribe they came from. Even NPCs from each tribe were diverse in their designs, animations, and more. There's also tons of cultural representation amongst both the playable and NPC characters from Natlan, expressing representation of Latin American, North American indigenous, and African cultures. I do know that skin tone is a huge topic of conversation at the moment, and we will get back to that later. The devs did a fantastic job of making you feel like you were truly experiencing an entirely different culture from the rest of Teyvat. The introduction of Natlan also brought a new region to explore, and y'all know exactly how much I love exploration. From the cliffs of the Tequemacon Valley to the pools and islands of the Toyak Springs, and the ruins of Natlan to the vibrant hills of the Easy Breeze Holiday Resort, the whole nation explored various biomes and terrain, featured some of the most fun puzzles the game has had in recent memory. Players also received new exploration mechanics through the Saurians, an adorable set of little creatures that each come with a unique ability and help you to explore and complete puzzles throughout the region. You could change it to them anytime, as long as they didn't try to beat your ass first. And those abilities were actually shared with the playables from the tribes that they're affiliated with. Kanich is literally Genshin Spider-Man. Mualani can surf the waves. Shilonen and Kachina are scaling sheer cliffs. Shaska and Aoife take to the skies. Auroran and Sitlali can float and interact with their sigils. And Veresa and Eonsan can charge into battle and blast up some stones. Well, and of course there's Mavwika, who can just do like all of the things. Now, though I'll try to avoid it, there are definitely some spoilers ahead, so this is your warning now. One thing I love about Natlan is that they continue to tell very emotional stories, even though a lot of times the endings aren't horribly sad like they have been in other regions. A lot of our new friends have experienced traumas of their own, but the power from Natlan's stories comes from their warrior spirit and the need to work together to accomplish something that seems impossible. Mavwika literally had to leave everyone she ever loved in the past, choosing to protect her people and her nation before her own. But she always knew that she would need help, and she assembled a team that would be powerful enough to help her snuff out the abyss once and for all. But that didn't mean there wouldn't be casualties. If you paid attention during the 5.1 story quest, your actions directly impacted the nation as a whole. The longer you took to battle and wipe out abyssal forces, the more casualties there were nationwide. And choosing where you would lend aid meant that actual NPCs were wiped from the game entirely in the areas that you left to fend for themselves. The mechanics implemented in this war sequence gave the story and your actions tangible weight. NPCs that used to be there would be wiped from your account forever, not to mention the weight and sadness that was brought by the unfortunate death of Chaska's sister Koichi, and its effect on Chaska and the other heroes of Natlan. The feeling of sadness as their nation mourned their losses was palpable, but conversely, the happiness when they celebrated their victories as well. And I know I'm going to probably get some hate for this take, but I actually loved the way they concluded Capitano's story. It was revealed in the end of the 5.3 Archon quest, he was carrying the fates and the souls of countless members of both Conria and Natlan from the years of war and brutality he had been experiencing. The pain and literal rotting he has endured all that time was finally brought to an end when he made the choice to sacrifice himself to allow Mavwika to live on and finally experience the happiness that she helped to bring when she made her sacrifice. He got the ending that he wanted and was finally able to release the souls that he'd carried back to the ley lines of Teyvat. Beyond the main story quests, however, there are tons of huge lore reveals made throughout the 5.x patch series as well. Natlan itself has a complex and rich history. The existence of lands of dragons before the era of humans, the wondrous and dangerous technologies that were long buried when they fell. We gained new knowledge about the Four Shades, even coming face to face with Renova. Players also experienced Natlan's unique ley lines and tribes' connection to them, with the unique ability to bring people back from death. And, of course, we cannot skip over the additional lore we've come to learn about Mare Javari, something that was teased in the Wanderer's Troop artifact set since the very beginning of the game, not to mention the introduction to Inefa in 5.8, giving us more context about her and Kanich's friend Ahau's lore, as well as teasing us even more knowledge about Nodcry. But of course, we've hit a lot of the positives and have yet to hit on the negatives, so let's go ahead and address some of these. The biggest problem that everyone has talked about has been been the cultural appropriation, specifically the lack of more melanated characters within Natlan. This has been a discussion in the game for a while, especially involving Sumeru and Natlan's regions, as the culture and vibe that they are derived from are not really reflected in the skin tones of the characters. Now, as a white guy, I really don't have anything I can say on this topic beyond the fact that I would love to see more diversity in character skin tones, and I would have loved to see it show up in Natlan as well. I will point out that a lot of the NPCs in the game were actually a lot more diverse in this new region, and a lot more characters with darker skin exist in the nation compared to, well, basically anywhere else in Teyvat. We did also get our darkest skinned character in the game thus far in Iansan, but I don't necessarily feel as though most people would say that's enough representation to represent an entire nation. It's not really my place to say much else. I'm gonna leave it at that. Another big issue some people had with Natlan was that it just simply didn't live up to their expectations. Many people arrived in Natlan with the expectation that it was gonna be a dark, gritty, and bloody nation of warring tribes, and were surprised to find that these tribes were actually just assembling to fight a common enemy together, the Abyss. I was even a bit surprised when I saw many of the characters just taking a nap, or reading books, or otherwise, instead of a warring, hardened, bloodshed nation and battle-hardened characters. I do think the Archon quest did a proper job of expressing a war against a dangerous foe, especially compared to stories like the Inazuman Civil War, which occurred almost 3 years ago, by the way, but we literally saw Kachina die. And we had to go through an entire portion of the Archon quest just to recover her and bring her soul back. Anyone who still invested themselves in the story would probably agree that the story that they were trying to tell in these Archon quests was very different. I think it had a greater impact than an all-out war between tribes. There were also, of course, some varying opinions about a lot of characters' designs, which I found really interesting. People called Shaska really ugly, which I never understood because she was the first character that really stood out to me, and the only one from the teaser I definitely wanted to pull for. A lot of people took issue with design choices like Shaska's one-legged pants, or Mavwika's leather bike suit with the zipper that goes all the way down around her coochie. And some of these are viable criticisms, mind you. I don't think all the designs were great, and I did definitely prefer Mavwika's pre-time skip outfit a lot more than her final design, but I think it's important to make sure that just as people are upset that people's skin tones weren't represented, that we're not also hating on outfits or character designs that are meant to represent certain people's cultures just because you think they look ugly. But if there's viable criticism, then that's a separate issue. And mind you, this is not me validating Mavwika's leather outfit, but you know, it is what it is. We've also ultimately extended the length of the Archon quests again in Natlan. According to Arancia on Reddit, the main story quest for Natlan takes about 15 hours and 54 minutes to play, beating Fontaine for the longest story at 15 hours and 12 minutes. Not by much, but each year the Archon quest seems to be getting longer. I mean, look at the others. Sumeru, which a lot of people complain was like super long or whatever, it was only 10 hours and 36 minutes, and the other three are shorter than that. I don't really see this as a downside, however. Natlan had a ton of lore and culture to represent in order to properly tell its story, and there wasn't really any particular point in the story that stood out to me as excessively boring, repetitive, or droning. It genuinely kept the story moving for the most part, and we got to know a lot about Natlan and the characters along the way. And finally, one of the biggest anti-Natlan arguments. Technology. And finally, one of the biggest anti-Natlan arguments. Technology. How were they so advanced? Isn't this a fantasy game? Things like DJs, turbo twirlies, and even a motorcycle does seem like a stretch compared to other technologies in Teyvat. But we've seen a steady progression of technology and magic. Fontaine had clockwork mecha, floating water cubes in the sky, and all kinds of other tech. Sumeru had the knowledge to lock away a god for years, created a Gundam-like robot for Scaramouche that could supposedly contain the power of a god, and did we all forget about the Akasha? The people of Sumeru literally had magical Google strapped to the side of their heads for years. Beyond the steady progression of technology in this high fantasy setting, there's also something that people forget about Natlan. Phlogiston and the lost technology of a highly advanced dragon society. In the Age of Dragons, the highly intelligent beings would use phlogiston to store information and record knowledge, things that we learned throughout the course of the world quests in Natlan. And phlogiston also had properties that acted similarly to elemental technology in the current era of Teyvat. The humans of Natlan eventually found that it could be used to power mechanisms and inventions, and this allowed them to craft and revive designs found from ruins of the dragon's ancient civilizations. They even learned to craft new ancient names with it. And it worked because phlogiston is essentially a liquid computer, storing centuries of data. On the surface, sure, the technology seems highly advanced, but this is hardly the first time this has happened in a high fantasy setting. In fact, many of the most famous fantasy storylines feature amorphous tales about advanced civilizations from ancient times that mysteriously fell and left behind relics that modern adventurers or societies would discover and use for good or for evil. Unlike some of those stories though, we actually get detailed backstory about the lore of Natlan that explains why things like this should exist in the first place. So, what are my overall thoughts about the Nation of War? Personally, I've loved Natlan as a nation. It may not have been the best Archon quest we've ever had, but I think too many people decided to dismiss it or missed some of the deeply provocative stories that this experiment of a tale was meant to communicate. The story was filled with emotional yet positive energy. It emphasized the collective effort that it takes to win a war. Despite expectations, Natlan was an incredibly unique experience, and I feel lucky to have experienced a nation so rich in culture and themes that were both beautiful to behold and a joy to experience.